We will watch when. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Want to just give a shout out to whoever makes weather right now, because today is absolutely gorgeous here in Minnesota. Thanks to KFAI for wonderful public policy, public affairs programming. Thanks for my affiliation with the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black Press USA. This program not only is being broadcast locally here on KFAI, but reaching a national audience through the Facebook page of the Black Press of America at Black Press USA, also streamed through the platforms of McFarlane Media and Inside News. Having said that, you who are listening or watching, we'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Send comments in on the Facebook comment line. And even if it's comments later, you can always email your concerns, your comments, your criticisms to me at al@Insight News, and I'd be glad to pass them along to our guests. Well, our guests today are members of the Highway 252 Safety Task Force. It's a group of concerned citizens who live on the Highway 252 corridor. Joining me today are Stephen Cooper, Bill Newman, Tom Curry, and Tara McCarthy. And Tara reached out to me. She heard one of the shows that we did in the past month or two with members of the Stair Step Foundation, the shows attempting to engage the Minnesota Department of Transportation in bringing information about potential changes, improvements on the Highway 252 I-94 project. And Tara called me to say that some of us feel like our voices haven't been heard. We'd like to present another side of the story. And obviously, I was pleased to get the call. And I asked Tara to give me her sort of background, her take on where we are, and if she would bring together her colleagues, friends, neighbors, members of the committee, to have a conversation about another point of view about a critical, important public safety issue in Minneapolis. So Tara, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reaching out. This is why we're here, is to bring voice to the residents of our community. And thank you for organizing today's program. Let me have you do the background. Why has the 252 Safety Task Force formed? And what is the mission?
Well, I'm going to tell you just from my perspective, and then our group has gathered lots of information that we'll share with you too. But in 2014, our son Jason was killed on 252 at a left-hand turn lane on 73rd. Since then, MnDOT has talked about wanting to increase the safety of 252. And after we lost Jason, we certainly wanted any other families to avoid losing someone on that dangerous highway. Things were kind of slow for me to get involved. MnDOT seemed to be doing some things, and then things kind of went on pause for a little bit. About 2 years ago, we really got involved again because we realized the plans that they had started were they said it was intentional for safety, but when we as lay people even looked at their plans, we could tell that the safety was not going to be helped and possibly harmed, not only for people but the environment. So then the guys on the screen here, they are all my neighbors, and we kind of realized we needed to be a little bit more organized about it. So since then, we have, formed this committee, and we're recognized by the Brooklyn Center City Council. We meet weekly. We've talked to the county commissioner. We've talked to MnDOT multiple times. We've talked to the city council. We've talked to our state representative, Samantha Vang. We've talked to people from the Department of Transportation. We've really been out there trying to get as much information as we can so that we can share and hopefully inspire MnDOT to really make sure that this is a safe change for 252. Oops.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I was muted.
Sorry.
Tara, why don't we go around the table and ask everyone who's here to introduce themselves and sort of say what their stake is. And again, this is informal, unscripted. So all of you guys feel free to interject and to move the conversation to make sure that we don't leave this hour with something that you wanted to say not getting said. That's my goal. So I'm going to start with you, Tom. Introduce yourself and what is your stake? What is your interest? What is your vision?
okay. Yeah, my name is Tom Corey, and I've been involved with neighborhood organizations since the 1970s, which tells a little bit about my age. And I was actually involved in one of the earlier Brooklyn Center comprehensive plans, providing input to the city. The heart of the issue here is safety, just as Terry has mentioned. We're both very concerned about temporary measures on this project, which goes from North Minneapolis through Brooklyn Center, through Brooklyn Park, and on long term. So far to date, MnDOT has refused to set safety goals to make this proposed highway enhancement at least as safe as the average intersection. And right now we have two of the top 10 most dangerous intersections on Highway 252. And we're looking at spending $300 million on this project. I want this neighborhood to be better for the community. And actually part of my past history is I was one of the three founders of the Riverwood Neighborhood organization with a goal to improve the quality of life of our residents. We see this highway as something that has a major impact on us.
Okay, great. Let's go to Stephen Cooper. Stephen, I haven't seen you in a long, long time. I don't know if we've seen each other.
It has been a while.
We worked together either directly or indirectly 20 years ago. But it's good to see you again.
We did that on a lot of projects, and I am delighted that you're still speaking the truth out there and getting things, getting people to understand things. With the 252 project, and both Tara and Bill have hit the key goal. But one of the things that raised the concern is MnDOT put together a proposal that ignored its own safety rules and ignored the federal safety rules and tried to build a interchange that had to be at least a mile from the other interchange, put it a third of a mile away. Entry lanes have to be at least an absolute minimum of 2,000 feet, made it 800 feet. And for those of your listeners who know where 252, Highway 100, 694, 94 all come together, that's what we're talking about, probably the busiest interchange in the northern part of Minneapolis. This project affects North Minneapolis, it affects Brooklyn Center, and what we see happening again is dumping on Brooklyn Center and dumping on North Minneapolis the traffic that currently goes on 169, currently goes on 35W, currently goes on Central, currently goes on Highway University, and virtually every other highway, and funneling it all over to 252. About 10 to 20 million more cars a year coming down this road. Now, the thing that's even more concernful about that is they wanted to put the interchange at the most dangerous, most harmful location. What I mean for that is 110 feet from the Mississippi River, moving 252 over towards the Mississippi River and putting an interchange that goes 25 feet up in the air over the roofs of all the houses in the area. It's doing it at a place that cannot be safe. And the reason, and I think Tom pointed out that in the entire state, two of the interchanges or intersections on 252 are the most dangerous in the entire state. Now, what you have here is the reason they're the most dangerous is because of their locations. They're just too close to these other highways under every safety rule. And yet the plan we saw before, once again, was placed in the interchanges at exactly or essentially the exact same place. So what that did is it makes it incredibly unsafe. So we started looking at it, not just us, but the whole community. At our meetings, there'll be hundreds of people there that were had before we formed the committee. And then as far as the poll that was taken of people in the neighborhood, I think approximately 165 people answered, and all but one of them voiced concerns about the fact that MnDOT was not being public with what it's doing. My goodness, guys, we're seeing that again. What we're seeing again is the meetings that are held in order to discuss what they're actually going to do, the public is not allowed to come to or listen to. And what I found particularly striking is one of those situations is when they were discussing public engagement. In other words, the public can't be part of it. They have these things called listening sessions, and the trouble with the listening sessions is we listen and they talk. They're supposed to be, they listen to us, and when we give questions, they set it up so their answers are not, no record is made of them. A record's made of the questions, but no record of the answers. And that's where one of the things that Tara was saying became so concernful. And what I mean by that is everybody knows, MnDOT knows, we know, everybody knows changes are necessary because this is so unsafe. So many people died there. They're refusing to make any changes for 4 or 5 years until they put their new plan in place. The changes that have been proposed are very inexpensive. Of course, they're talking a $300 million project. The changes proposed are very inexpensive. Things like putting concrete barriers for left turn protection, things like putting warning signs up that say traffic light coming up, things like actually, strangely enough, enforcing the speed limit. All of these changes are being made once again, not for Brooklyn Center, not for North Minneapolis, not for Minneapolis at all, but for people who are more than 10 miles away. When you look at their projections, they're trying to save 2 minutes for somebody coming from more than 10 miles away. That's probably 15 miles from downtown to get downtown. Now, that might be an okay goal, but not at the cost of making it dangerous. And the biggest problem with 252 is if you put that interchange back where they've been proposing putting it again, it'll be a total bottleneck with people being in crash ups and some of those people, unfortunately, being seriously injured or worse. Bill, who will speak in a minute, looked at, he's an engineer, looked at this data, went and looked at some of the reports, and found that it would be 40% more, and if I misspoke, correct me, Bill, 40% more accidents because of the plans they've been proposing. So what we're hoping, and fortunately, Tara's one of the people who's been selected to be on the citizens group that MnDOT is going to listen to, along with a couple other people from the neighborhood. But what we're hoping is that they will open their eyes and stop insisting on putting things in a place that's incredibly dangerous. A couple quick more points, and then I'll kick it to Bill. The other points are environmentally, this is a disaster. As I mentioned, they're talking about putting it 110 feet from the Mississippi River. And we all know the Mississippi River is a wild animal treasure. It's a major flyway for virtually every bird that lives in Minnesota that migrates. It's a lot of people don't realize it's also a major walkway or trail for a lot of different types of animals that many of us probably never get to see in our yards. The kind that everybody does see, raccoons and deer, but things like mountain lions and all kinds of other things use this trail. The eagles that are flying through our yards and the blue herons and all the other things people see because they fly further and, you know, you can see them miles away. But the wild animals that use it as a trail will be heavily impacted. The other thing I'd like to say, and then I'll kick it to Bill, North Minneapolis, which this affects, Brooklyn Center have the highest asthma rates of anywhere in the region. And those asthma, we have the highest emergency room visits for children and adults. When you bring this many more cars, 10 to 18 million more cars, down one area that already has all these other highways. And don't forget, there's those studies that a number of scholastic organizations and highway organizations have looked at that show traditionally poor neighborhoods, and particularly neighborhoods of color. And don't forget, Brooklyn Center is the most diverse city in the entire state in terms of ethnicity. They are the ones where they dump the roads. And in this particular case, they're taking the road cars off of I-35. And you know, from driving I-35, once you get north of the downtown, houses and businesses are way far away from the road. You know, from 169, houses and businesses are way far from the road. You know, from Central Avenue, there's a whole service road between that and any of the business and houses. That's protection. None of that on 252. The 252 is built right on top of the houses. And if they go ahead with it as they've currently planned it, now one thing I want to emphasize, and I think Tara did a nice job with it at the beginning, is we're not saying we don't need new plans. We do. And we're not saying that there shouldn't be changes. There should. What we're saying is the goal has to be safety. The purpose has to be safety. The purpose can't be getting 18 million cars down that road as the number one priority, and number 5 or 6 or 7 being safety, and number 10 or 12 being pollution. You've got to lead with the purpose. And the purpose was to make 252 safe for everybody. And I really want to stress this. If you happen to live in Rogers and you're coming across 610 and down 252, clipping along at a good pace, and you suddenly hit a very dangerous interchange, you're as likely to be the one killed as anybody else is. And it's kind of like what they had to do. I don't know if you remember this, Al, but you remember when they had to rebuild the 694 35W interchange because they, just like they're trying to do here, they hadn't put in enough of an entrance lane and cars were going over the top and dropping on cars down low. We don't need to repeat that. And with this kind of money being spent, upwards to $300 million, there's no excuse for it. We need safety, and I've talked more than my time. I think I should stop.
Stephen, thank you. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today, my guests are members of the 252 Safety Task Force out in, did I say it right, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park? Which one are you guys in?
Well, we live in Brooklyn Center, but it's the changes are going to happen in North Minneapolis, Brooklyn Center, and Brooklyn Park. The most intense ones in Brooklyn Center. But the impact, the addition of cars coming down 94 from downtown to 694 is substantial. And so everybody who lives in North Minneapolis who wants to get on and off of 694 is going to have a lot more competition for getting on and off that road. I wanted to
say before we threw the ball over to Bill Newman, and I meant to say it after you spoke, Tara, just still condolences for your family's loss, for the loss of your son. I know that there have been other people killed, and so the issue of safety obviously is something that everybody has to pay attention to. But I wanted to say to you in a very public way, in a genuine way, I feel deeply for your loss.
Thank you.
For any other parents. So Bill, jump in. You're an engineer.
Yep. Actually, my background's primarily chemistry and biology, and I do environmental work. But I have reviewed the highway safety rules and regulations in a great deal of detail, and they're pretty straightforward, both the federal and the state design manual. And so, being a part of the Riverwood neighborhood in the vicinity of the 66 interchange, I got involved because I was concerned about it and how it might affect our community. But the more I learned about the previous proposed design and the safe design rules for freeway design, I became alarmed, frankly, and shocked. And the DOT has never been honest with us about the fact that they're breaking their own rules. We've asked for safety analysis and crash modeling for individual interchanges like the one that was proposed at 66 and how that compares to other interchanges. And the most we've ever gotten from them is just sort of a vague average of, of the 3 interchanges that we proposed, we might see a reduction of this percent. And I think it was something like 40% or up to 60%. But let's talk about what those percentages mean. The crash data from 2016 to 2019, if you look at 66, the reason it's dangerous is not just that it's a stoplight. The reason it's dangerous is it's much too close to a major system-to-system interchange where multiple freeways come together. 94, 694, and 252 all merge at that point, and people are getting on and off, changing lanes, and then bang, a few hundred feet later, there's 66. So when you look at the average crash rate for a high volume intersection, the crash rate at 66 is 5 times higher. So we're not talking a little bit, we're not talking 10%, we're not talking 20%, we're talking 500% higher than the average. And the DOT is not even committed to reaching that average crash rate. And frankly, that's shocking. And as Steve was mentioning, one of the key design flaws in the previous proposed folded diamond interchange was that going southbound, the distance between the nose of the on-ramp where you hit the straightaway and the nose of the off-ramp where traffic would exit to go west on 694 was 830 feet. The guidance for the federal design rules and the state design manual are preferred is 3,000 feet or more. Adequate is 2,500. Absolute minimum, and that strong language, is 2,000. So they propose 830 feet. And I came across some crash modeling of on-ramp to off-ramp spacing in a NCHRP report, and I won't list out what that acronym means, but it's basically the kind of the National Science Foundation and Federal Highway Commission's research group on safety. And based on my data, just that spacing alone would increase the crash rate by about 45%. So the bottom line is, if we want safety on the 252 corridor, we cannot have an intersection or an interchange at 66. It needs to be moved farther north, preferably about a mile, to meet the minimum safety standards. And there seems to be a large amount of pressure. I don't know if it's coming from the business community, but they seem to be trying to jam fit an interchange at 66. Now, the intersection at 85th is also dangerous. It's 3 times the average crash rate, but it's almost a mile away, and it isn't such a complex, confluence of 3 major highways.
Sure.
It's 610 slowly transitioning to 252 and 252 transitioning to 610. So I think they can do a safe interchange there. And then, of course, the last point is, if safety was really the goal, we wouldn't need to make this a freeway. We could have a safer expressway with stoplights, separated left turn lanes, non-conflict U-turns, etc. It would carry a similar amount of traffic, and it would serve our communities well. But what it doesn't do is get all of the folks from the outer suburbs to downtown Minneapolis 2 minutes faster.
And
what's the difference between a freeway and an expressway? What are those terms?
Yeah, the definition, it's a bit confusing, and we were confused about this for a while, but the way the DOT is using the term, an expressway would still have traffic lights on it, whereas a freeway would be on-ramp and off-ramp type interchanges only. And they sold the freeway originally as the only way to make for a safe road. But now that we've learned more, I think an expressway with appropriate safety measures would be less expensive, and it wouldn't funnel an additional 18 million cars a year through our already polluted neighborhoods. So I guess bottom line, if we want safety, which is what we all want,
that's what we want.
We can't have an interchange or an intersection at 66. If we want to serve the current traffic flow in the communities, an expressway would be best. If we must have a freeway and become a dumping ground for the outer suburbs traffic, then let's at least not make it a tremendously dangerous one. So.
And Al, I assume that you've probably driven on 252 yourself on occasion, and you may also drive on Bottineau or 82. And you may have noticed how that was totally redone recently. And when it was redone, it left in the traffic lights. And it's much better now, much faster now, but it left in the traffic lights for a good reason. If you have traffic coming for 10 or more miles, it doesn't tend to go at the speed limit. It tends to creep up and up and up. So you're not going at 60 or 65 miles an hour. By the time you've been on a freeway for a long period of time, you're going at 75, 80, 85 miles an hour. And if you look at 94, you'll see exactly that happens every morning. If you don't have any brakes in the traffic, one of the problems you have is the cars trying to get on. And the reason I asked you, you've been on 252, I knew you had, right there at 66th, where you try to get on right now, the only way it's possible to get on, because so many cars are trying to come over to the right to get to 94, Highway 100, and 694 East and West, You got this wall of cars coming right, and that's exactly where the 66 lane is planned to be, with no entrance lane. So you're kind of be dumping this traffic, which is looped around the entry lane, probably doing 35, 40 miles an hour to weave its way through traffic driving at probably 70 or more miles per hour. And then if it's not going to the east or the west, but is actually going towards downtown, after it makes its way through that first wave of traffic, it's got to find a space in that second wave of traffic. And you're talking school buses, gas tankers, older cars. There's absolutely nothing about this plan, and I want to stress zero. There's zero about this plan that benefits Brooklyn Center. There's virtually, I'm sorry?
Oh, I was going to add to that about benefiting Brooklyn Center. But I also want to mention a couple of points from the Minnesota Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council. They've come out with some goals that the Minnesota Highway Department has said that they have adopted. One of those is setting a preliminary goal of a 20% reduction in vehicle miles traveled statewide by 2050. This project is encouraging cars to travel further to come down this 250 corridor. And another of those goals is to continue to prioritize other solutions before considering highway expansion. So the lack of looking at short-term options to improve safety is just totally against that. And then Minnesota Highway Department has also said, we accept the livability framework. This framework is based on what people expect from our project work. This includes quality of life, health and environment, sense of place, legacy, safety, personal security, freedom from danger, risk or harm, connections, infrastructure aligning meaningfully, equity. And right now, MnDOT is taking a very narrow look at transportation. They're saying, we just want to move people faster.
In car.
They're not bringing up safety is the number one goal. And at the same time, we want to enhance the neighborhood. We want this project to be a benefit to the community. Mayor Mike Elliott of Brooklyn Center has emphasized that to our group on multiple occasions.
And along that line, to bootstrap
before you go, Stephen, we see each other because we're doing this on StreamYard or Zoom, but our listeners are not seeing us. So each time you speak, please say your name so that people get a sense of who's speaking.
Okay. The last speaker was Tom Corey, and this is Steve Cooper. To bootstrap on what Tom was pointing out, one of the very surprising things is initially when they came with their proposal that they wanted the city councils to approve, they cut bus service. They cut it so there would be no stops for express buses in Brooklyn Center on 252. And they cut other alternatives. And as far as Tom's point about the quality of life, they didn't look at all about what the impact was of further dividing Brooklyn Center. Don't forget, Brooklyn Center is a little bit like a piece of pie that's been diced 14 ways. I mean, you've got Highway 100 looping around, and as you know, you can't go onto Highway 100 without coming onto 252, doing a U-turn and going back onto it. And that's for safety of Highway 100 and safety of 694 and 94. That same sort of safety concern has been ignored when they're planning 252, which is to make sure you don't have too many cars too close together.
Tara, I wanted to ask you again, going back to your son, Jason, right? Tell me that story, if you don't mind, if you're okay talking about that. I want to,
how it happened, do you mean?
Yeah, what happened? Just what happened? And also, who was your son, Jason? Just in respect and honor of his life.
Oh, wow. I wasn't prepared for this, but I think I can do it. He was 16 and he was a wonderful, wonderful boy, kind of the light of our life. But he was coming home on a Tuesday afternoon, about 2:00 in the afternoon. It was a beautiful sunny day. And he was turning left on 73rd to come back into the neighborhood. And a drunk driver hit him from behind. This driver had also crashed into somebody at 85th also. And was traveling at high speeds, because when you're on the left-hand turn lane, you're at a stop, and the people coming next to you are going 60 or 70. So he had a fatal injury to his brain, and wasn't able to recover.
Okay, well, thank you. So sorry to hear that, and thank you for sharing that. Yeah, no, I didn't plan to. I know you didn't plan to share that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
It's okay. It's always with me, so it's okay.
Is most of the problem northbound or southbound, or is it both ways? How do you all perceive what the challenges and the needs are that have to be addressed?
This is Steve Cooper talking. It's a great question, Al. I would say the biggest problems are southbound, but there's tons northbound too. No one of the entrance and exits complies with the safety rules, not one of them. But the biggest offender is southbound coming at 66. To go back to what Tara was saying, one of the things Tara has emphasized over and over quite correctly, if you just put those little safety concrete barriers by the left-hand turn lanes, these kinds of accidents would not happen. And that's the temporary measure for the next 5 years. Because don't forget, they're not even planning to do this for approximately 5 years. These interim things, nobody debates. Everybody agrees would save lives. There's no reason for not doing it. And that's why we're all shocked at one of those listening sessions when MnDOT said it was not going to do that. And we asked why. Many people asked why. And the reason was, we don't want to make it look like we've made our mind up as to what we're going to do. And everybody pointed out, that's silly. First of all, that doesn't indicate what you're going to do. It indicates you're concerned with dealing with the problem you've known about for 10 years now, rather than 5 years from now, with very inexpensive solutions. 300 million is what it costs. Oh, it may not be that, it keeps changing, but approximately 300 million is what it costs for their plan. What we're talking about for the interim measures probably costs less than 50,000. So you're talking right now. And one of the concerns we had is the only real reason we could see why MnDOT didn't want to do that is it would allow the collection of actual hard data as to what the impact on safety is by putting these safety things into place. And that's why we really think it's important. The thing here is...
Let me reiterate here. I'm looking at the key issues sheet that Tara put together for me. And I want to make sure again that everything that you're saying is said clearly. And one item, your number one item, was no temporary safety steps. That's what you're addressing. And you're saying that MnDOT has admitted that it will do nothing to improve safety on Highway 252 and 94 during the years between now and while this corridor is being rebuilt. So that's a very specific concern. And when you raise the concern, what do you respond? How do you get a response?
Well, Al, Steve again. We get the response I just told you. The response is it's absurd. It's a non sequitur. They don't have a reason. They don't claim that these things wouldn't make it safer. What they say is it would make it look like we've made our mind up already that we're not going to take out the traffic lights. No, that's absurd. And then the second thing you say to them, even though there's no validity to that, and we see temporary measures done on virtually every road around the metro when there's a problem, even if it did, saving lives and making things safer is far more important than a minor PR point. And that was said directly to them. And all they would say, they would just keep repeating the same thing back over and over. I think 7 or 8 different people asked them this question. And every time they came back with the same response. So the point in our mind is the response is not responsive to the question. It's evading the question, it's avoiding the question. And I think Tom mentioned, or maybe it was Bill mentioned, one of the real problems we've had throughout this process is we get make-believe reasons as explanations for things. Bill mentioned the thing about not getting the data separately for each proposed interchange. There's no legitimate reason for that, so they come up with some excuse. They come up with misinformation some of the time, or mispresented information other times. And that's why of the survey that was done, all but one person said they wanted more openness. They wanted more accurate information. They wanted to be involved in that process. And the reason is just about everybody is confused as heck as to why they're doing what they're doing. It's not hard to come out and be honest with us. It's not hard to come out and say, the reason we're not doing any, I don't know what the answer could be, but the reason we're not saving lives now is.
Right. And
So-
when
so-
we look at
Go ahead. Tara, go
Bill's,
ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, this is Tara McCarthy. When we look at Bill's calculation of crash risks and stuff, when we think that MnDOT's not going to improve this, for 5 years, that's 4 more people that are going to lose their lives, and that's not acceptable. And we keep asking all the people that we can think to ask, and MnDOT told us at one of the listening sessions that they're the ones, MnDOT is the one that owns that. They're the ones that get to decide whether it's temporary measures or not. And they have said, no, they're not going to do anything. And one of the reasons why we wanted to be on the show here with you is to inspire people to reach out to their city council members and the elected officials. And also MnDOT has a web page that you can go to where you can, tell your comments about this. And we want there to be more voices than just ours peppering them with these questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Tom
this
Curry,
is-
I think you started off with the
sorry.
question or making the statement that there are no safety goals.
Right.
I think that was you that said that, Tom. And if it was you, go deeper on that. The notes here say that MnDOT has stated it will not require any specific traffic safety goals in the plan it selects for the new Highway 252 I-94. And so from your point of view, you are saying that the government, the agency, has indicated that it will have no requirement of specific safety goals. And
Okay,
that's
this is Tom.
Tom Corey,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, Tom Corey. Yeah, so the current draft plans talk about a 40% reduction in accident rate. But there is no statement, and there's an unwillingness of Minnesota Department of Transportation to give specific reduction goals for individual interchanges. For example, the one that Bill mentioned at 66 that has a rate 5 times higher than the state average for these types of high volume highways. This generalized 40% reduction would still mean it's 3 times more dangerous after newly constructing the highway. Totally unacceptable.
And even,
Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
I just say even the 40% is not put in their purpose and need. And the purpose and need is what they have to supposed to do to meet their goals. Bill hit it right on the head there, but they're not even willing to put that in the purpose and need. That's just something they put elsewhere in their suggestions. What we're saying is the purpose for this, as it was sold initially, was the need for safety. And that we think it's a very minor thing to say, well, make it average, make it the same as roads that have been around for 40 years whose traffic has immensely increased. And there's only one reason for not doing that we can think of. And the only reason for not doing that is they want to prioritize this other goal of getting more traffic down there and leaving the interchange where it is. And the trouble is you can't make it safer if you do that. So we're saying make a choice. Is this for safety or is this for 2 minutes? And if it's for 2 minutes, then admit that, but don't pretend it's for safety.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. My guests today are members of the 252 Safety Task Force. With me are Stephen Cooper, Bill Newman, Tom Corey, and Tara McCarthy, all residents of the Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center neighborhood impacted by discussions on how to improve safety and, I guess, planned construction rebuilding of the Highway 252 I-94 corridor that comes out of downtown Minneapolis through North Minneapolis and into Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, where 94 and 252 merge at the north of the city. So you've mentioned, and in your notes, you talk about a concern being health and community equity. You mentioned specifically, Stephen Cooper, about asthma rates and the impact of automobiles on that. So talk more about, your concerns for health and what does equity mean for you? What does community equity mean?
Equity means a lot of things, and I'll just hit on the one that you focused on. First of all, equity means you don't dump all the health issues on a poorer community in order to make the air more pristine in a more affluent community. What you have in Brooklyn Center and North Minneapolis, and by the way, North Minneapolis has an even higher rate than does Brooklyn Center. So when you look at the hierarchy, you've got North Minneapolis way up real high, then you got Brooklyn Center not quite as high but high, and then you got everybody else down here. And in that area, one of the known and documented causes of agitation to asthma is automobile pollution and automobile exhaust. Putting so much more of it there, and it'd be different. Here's the thing that surprised us along the way. Early on, we thought it was necessary. They were saying it was necessary to use 252 because so many more buildings are building north of here. But then when we got into the data, we realized that has nothing to do with it. This is not more traffic because of more cars. This is more traffic because those cars are being diverted off of every other north-south highway. And that's something I want people to think about for a minute. What you're saying is we're going to concentrate it in one area, and that's consistent with the 50-year history of highway building, is that you put it in the areas where you think you're going to get the least public resistance. Here, with the asthma question, that's just the obvious one. The other pollutions that come from automobile extend to everything. It's only recently being discovered, but the effect of tires and the little particles that come off of tires, now that we've all been talking about lungs a lot with COVID, those little particles go right into your lungs. And it was first discovered out in the Pacific Northwest, where for initially reasons that were inexplicable, fish were dying. Salmon were dying in the river, and they couldn't figure out why. And then figure it's because those the road was right by the river, and it was going right in. That's why I emphasized before the importance of having the road distant from the houses. The closer the road is to the houses, the more at risk are the occupants of those houses and apartment buildings. Often these are apartment buildings. Not far off of 252 are quite a number of apartment buildings, many of which are occupied by people who may not have cars of their own and therefore are more dependent on public transportation, which they're reducing. As far as the asthma risk and the pollution risk, it's almost like go any direction you want to, and there's more of it. But you mentioned community, so I want to go to the community equity. The other thing with the community equity is very striking. Brooklyn Center is being expected to give up the space. Brooklyn Center is being expected to shoulder part of the cost, and Brooklyn Center is getting absolutely nothing out of this. Right now, if you come onto this new freeway, and if it has high occupancy lanes and all those other things, those don't benefit people in Brooklyn Center. Those are for people who are 20 miles out. So we're spending, tens of millions of dollars to build a lane that we claim is for high occupancy. But we all know when you drive around town and you look at who's in the high occupancy lanes, it's single drivers who have paid that little trivial fee, the 25 cents or the 50 cents, to use that multi-million-dollar lane. That is not something that's a benefit for us. That's not something that's benefit for normal folks. That's something that gets the people those 2 minutes. That's something that says, okay, if you're coming from far out suburb X and you want to get downtown a little quicker, don't take the bus, don't take the train, take this even faster 2-minute quicker route, and that's what you do. But the trouble is you do it at a tremendous cost to the communities you're going through. And the ones that are most heavily hit are North Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center, almost evenly hit hard. And now the one advantage of I-94 south of 694 is the houses are back off of it in most places, not all places, but in most places. But that's not true in 252. So when you're talking community equity, one of the first things you want to say, I think, if you're talking any other organizational decision, okay, what's the benefit to Group A? Zero.
Mhm.
What's the cost of Group A? Health, safety, community involvement, non-car transportation. Oh, so we got huge benefits to others, none to Brooklyn Center, North Minneapolis. Huge detriments to those communities. That's not equity.
What about specific access and movement to the residents of Brooklyn Park, of Brooklyn Center, of North Minneapolis? Is there a consideration from your point of view of how whatever happens can make life easier, better, safer,
And
cleaner?
and that's
How
our
are
big
those interests being brought
yeah,
to the table?
Al, that's our big concern. There isn't, and there should be, and there could be. And one of the things we point out, as we said at the beginning, we're for a more sensible solution, not no solution. And we agree with the idea that things have to be done. But I like your question. You've encapsulated what it is we're concerned about. You can make that a greenway. You can make that a parkway. You can do you can do a lot more pedestrian overpasses. You can do a lot more bike overpasses so people can get to the river and back into the community. You don't have to make it like the Berlin Wall where nobody can get back and forth across like they're planning. There are so many things you can do that it enhances Brooklyn Center and enhances North Minneapolis. When you talk about North Minneapolis, you're not seeing any clear benefits to North Minneapolis. So you are seeing some clear benefits the further out you go. The interchanges that are proposed in Brooklyn Park are much, much, much safer than the one proposed in Brooklyn Center. They are model interchanges, and we have no criticism of those interchanges. But as you come south and get closer to 694, the interchange is a death trap. And so you have all of the things you just said. It's not equitable. It's not considering that community. It is polluting. And we haven't really hit the full extent of it. But there is nothing in the equation that somebody in Brooklyn Center would say, I'm going to get home quicker. No, you're not. I can get home safer. No, you're not. I'm going to be able to go in my backyard and play with the kids on the swings and safer air. No, you're not. I'm going to be able to get over to the Mississippi River. No, you're not. Oh, my car's in the shop. I'm going to be able to take the express bus. No, you're not. When you come into Brooklyn Center and you look at, is this more beautiful? No, it isn't. I mean, it's an ugly road. It doesn't have to be. You know, you remember 35E over in St. Paul going down to the river where they put the trees up and they reduce the speed limit. That's a parkway. And if you reduce the speed limit and you make it prettier, it's easier to swallow. Doesn't mean it solves the other problems, but it means it's easier to swallow. It's kind of like, you know, we're the group that's getting completely ignored. You know, we give and give, but we don't get anything.
That brings me to my next question. It's one of your points in the document you gave me that I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about. And that is the question, maybe Bill, you can answer this first, or Tom, or Tara, about transparency. What are you looking for? What do you need? What do you expect? What do you feel like the residents of your neighborhood, of your community, and of our town, of our state deserve? You mentioned specifically the EIS, environmental impact statement, progress, and you also made reference to a consultant chosen. What do you mean by that? What are you talking about?
Yeah, let me start on that. This is Bill Newman, and when I'm looking at my video camera here, I realize I'm scowling a lot. I don't know how many people actually watch this.
We call that mean mugging. But go ahead. Yeah.
This all kind of makes my blood boil. But I mean the previous design, you know, the DOT sprung this on us. We had meetings. We asked very specific questions. We either got a tap dance around those questions or no answers. They hid all these safety defects. So, you know, the EIS, which I believe they probably had to do because of the proximity to the Mississippi River and all the potential environmental impacts. The way an EIS is supposed to work is they're supposed to start with a review of community needs and come up with the needs and purpose. Then they're supposed to carefully consider all alternatives, how that affects the community, how it affects the environment. Our concern, and this is our concerns based on what we're seeing the DOT actually do, is that they're just trying to put a shine on the old design and use the EIS as a sell job. And you know, frankly, the EIS isn't even supposed to have started yet because they've selected a new consultant, but the old consultant is still performing these meetings, and they've got a draft needs and purpose statement, and they haven't even issued the contract for the proper EIS to the new consultants. And, you know, as an example of the sort of things that go on behind the scenes, they had an interagency meeting where Jerome Adams, the DOT project manager, he identified 2 risks. One was opposition to the interchange at 66, and one was the potential lack of bus rapid transit along the corridor. Now, to me, those are legitimate community concerns that should be reviewed and perhaps included in the needs of purpose. But apparently to Jerome, it's like, well, we don't want to have BRT and we want to jam that intersection at 66. So they're identifying them as a problem. And I think that's telegraphing what's really going on. And I would like to believe that they're acting in good faith, but I haven't seen much evidence of that yet. And I'll let Tom talk.
We're down to the last 3 or 4 minutes of the program, and I wanted to make sure again that all of the points that you wanted to bring out get touched. And I'm going to do 2 things to have any of you or all of you respond to. One, review again, and you mentioned it, Stephen Cooper, the environmental concerns and the protection of the river. Speak to that in particular. And then in the last minute, if each of you wants to make sort of a call to action to our listeners and viewers, feel free to do so.
Sure, and I'll keep it quick. As far as what the river is concerned, 252 goes further and further away from the river as it heads north. It picked the very closest place to the river, and then it moved it to the east towards the riverbank. So it's 110 feet away from the riverbank where it currently is, but that's eroding. And it might not be too far down the road till it's 80 feet away from the riverbank currently is. All of the problems that are caused by that, this is a national treasure. This is a national waterway. People swim in it, people boat in it, people do all fish in it, people do all kinds of other things in it. Imagine that 25 foot up in the air interchange with all those trucks and cars going on it. Anything coming off of those cars, trucks, whether it's oil slicks or tossed McDonald's wrappers or whatever, boom, they're going to wind up in the river. There's no buffer. There's nothing between that and the river. That is there's the river, there's a slight little slender strip of land, and then there's the interchange. So that causes that pollution problem. It also invades, as you might think, nesting areas. There's islands right there where birds nest. There's a lot of eagles out there. There's a lot of blue herons. There's a lot of other very easy to intimidate animals. And then there's the ones running along the way. As far as what people can do, just
wait. No, so somebody said mountain lions?
I saw one in my
that was
backyard
Tara's
in
husband who saw that one.
You did?
I didn't
Okay.
see that
Amazing.
myself. But
And
Tara's
Tara's
husband
neighbor
saw
saw one too, I
one
think.
time wandering back there, which was really fascinating. But there's all kinds of other beavers, everything you can imagine is out there. The one thing about what people can do, though, and I think that's an important point, Tara's going to give the website, but it is very important that people pay attention and ask questions and insist at MnDOT, not merely, MnDOT's used to doing things in a vacuum and nobody challenges them. I can see I'm using too much time. Let me stop and let other people talk.
Well, let's go to Bill, Tom, and then Tara will close with you, giving people how to connect.
Thank you.
Bill, take about a minute, Bill, or 45
Yeah,
seconds.
well, just seconds now, but moving the interchange a safe distance north solves a lot of problems. It moves it away from the river. It makes it much safer. It allows for a proper configuration, like an extended diamond. I didn't even get to the fact that the folded diamond is by itself dangerous. So, we hit the highlights in terms of it being too close. But the line of sight distances, the configuration of the interchange, it's just bad on many levels. So we need to move it north. All aspects are better when we do that. And I'll let Tom speak.
Tom
Sorry
Corey, about 30
Okay.
seconds.
Yeah, this is Tom Corey. Yeah, safety needs to be the number one priority, and we need to take a wider view of these narrowly focused transportation projects to look at livability, the health, environment, etc.
And Tara, we'll close with you.
Sarah, yes. So our website that people can visit is highway252.org. So it's highway spelled out HIGHWAY, and then the numbers 252.org. We had to up that, so if people could just give us till tomorrow to check on it, that would be great. And then we have an email address that I check on, and I would, add anyone that wants to be on that email list, I will add them. That is 252safety@gmail.com. Again, it's the numbers 252safety@gmail.com.
Listen, we're out of time. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, Al.
Tara McCarthy, Tom Curry, Bill Newman, Stephen Cooper. Stephen, good to see you again.
Oh, it's great to see
An
you.
important topic. I'm glad that you all are willing to engage both the department and the public. I would like to bring you back. I think this is an important issue, and I think we can't talk too much about it. I'll be bringing the department back to have them present their point of view. My goal is that more information, more conversation, better decisions for all of us. Listen, thank you all. We'll see you later. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you much.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you underground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
Of all the rules you break,
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough.
Of all the rules you were breaking,
We've had enough.
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty,
It's gonna get filthy.
you better believe. Just roll up your sleeves.
It's gonna get rough. It's gonna be tough.
We all agree. We've had enough. We've had enough
Of all the rules you're breaking,
We've had enough.
all the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation.
We've had enough.
Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice,
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone. How can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We had enough. John Crawford, I know you've heard.
We've had enough.
Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand.
We've had enough.
Sean Bell,
Sean Bell.
what the hell?
We've had enough.
Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said?
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.